Hello, everyone. Hello, guests. Hello, B4H team. It's very good to have you all here. This is one more event that Politics for Her is delivering, and I'm very, very happy that we are able to talk about a matter of vital importance right now, and that we have the platform to give voices and to let us know how the things are working and how we can help, or just to take action or to be aware of anything and everything about the Palestinian genocide. So now introducing our dear colleagues, Haya Abidal Shabar. She's one of the speakers today. She's an officer of Politics for Her and activist. Also, we have Hams Fataleh. She's also from Politics for Her, and she's also an activist. And we have Lima Nazi. She's also a human rights activist and advocate. So it's very, very, it's honestly a pleasure to have such amazing woman as you guys here with us today. It's a shame that we have to still talk about a matter so difficult, and it's important, but it's difficult. I know that you guys made a lot of effort to be here today. Lima, we know you have like no time available and still you're here, so thank you very much. And that's it. I handle the floor to Lima. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me? First of all, thank you very much for having me with you in this platform. I think it's a very important platform to be among amazing women from different countries. I think it's, as we convene today, our hearts are heavy, not solely with the sorrow, but with the weight of unmet justice, a justice that has been deferred for generations under the shadow of occupation since 75 years. We're here today, not just, I think, for solidarity, but an unyielding call for action, a call that echoes and demands what the Palestinian people are already demanding. For me to give you a small introduction about myself, I was born in the image of the first Intifada in the 87. My life has been a testament for the Palestinian endurance under the illegal occupation. The occupation has not only stolen our land, but attempted to rob us of our identity, our voice, and our very existence. The first Intifada, it's all about the civil disobedience and popular resistance that I witnessed as a child were met with a brutality that no child should ever see. Yet it was this very brutality that forged within us an unbreakable bond of common strength and resilience. The second Intifada further cemented my resolve. Amid the blaze of armed resistance and the horrors of bombardment, our cities, once embraces culture and histories, became the front line of an imposed war, which is Ramallah. I was born in all my teenager spent in the second Intifada during an invasion and a bombardment. As a young woman from that city, I have seen firsthand the expansion of settlement, the erection of the apartheid wall, a creeping annexation carried out with bulldozers and rifles, backed by a narrative that seeks to justify such theft under the guise of a security. I have been an active since the second Intifada. I have been active in the front lines, organizing peaceful demonstrations and embodying creative resistance. Yet our peaceful endeavors were met with imprisonments and violence that marks of which I bear to this day, as I have been arrested twice. That scars are not just on my body, but on my soul in the soul of every Palestinian who have suffered humiliation, systematic racism, and the denial of a basic human rights. Now, as Gaza once again struggles under the torment of aggression, we must elevate our discussion beyond romanticizing Palestinian struggle This is a political and a human crisis, one that demands a political response. The machinery of oppression operates unabated, with each condemnation and resolution ignored, and every condemnation left unanswered by those with the power to enact change. The international legal framework is unequivocal. An occupying power, sorry, an occupying power. Oh my God, my phone, sorry. Uh, is prohibited from waging a war against the people that it occupies. There is no clause, no exceptions, no legal terminology that can justify the systematic oppression and calculated aggression against the Palestinian people. This war is against the Palestinian people who are under bombardment, siege, and constant threat of dispossession and ethnic cleansing across the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and, of course, Gaza Strip. Now, millions of lives are at stake. What we have been demanding for almost more than 50 days is an immediate ceasefire, a halt to the forced transfer, protection of our civilians, and unimpeded emergency humanitarian assistance. The credibility of the international system and its universal, I'm sorry, my phone is keep ringing. Sorry. The universal code of laws are on the line, not only in Palestine, but even the world over. Nothing under international law grants an occupying power the right to wage a war against people under its occupation. Certainly, there is nothing that grants them a free hand to commit genocidal aggression on the Palestinian people, breaching every law of war and openly declaring its intention to continue doing so. The humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is beyond catastrophic, as Israel is systematically degrading the fundamental of life in Gaza, as deliberately making the north uninhabitable while it makes life in the south unbearable. Our people in Gaza Strip face an existential threat due to the Israel siege, collective punishment, forced mass displacement, starvation, and relentless targeting of civilians. Since the 7th of October, the occupying forces have deliberately and systematically committed egregious international crimes, including war crimes, a crime against humanity, imposing a siege, starvation, collecting punishment, forcible displacement, and attacking civilian infrastructure. The staggering human toll of Israel's campaign of murder and destruction is an assault on humanity. Up to 20,000 Palestinians are killed and missing under the rubble, including at least 6,000 children. And even saying the numbers is always heavy, even to pronounce the number of children being killed. And of course, with more than 2,100 to 2,000 Palestinians, 25,000 injured. 1.7 million Palestinians have been internally displaced. These figures are irrefutable evidence that the occupation are the intended consequences of Israel's aggression, not collateral damage. Israel's escalation is most heinously manifested in its indiscriminate bombardment of civilian Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip, including the documented illegal use of white phosphorus in a densely populated civilian areas. Dozens of families consisting of 3 or 4 generations have been wiped out entirely without a survivor even to oversee funeral process. Israel bombardment targets homes, schools, shelters, hospitals, bakeries, water reserves, wheat mills, solar panel, churches, and mosques. The bombing targets all basic elements of life. 70% of the Palestinians in Gaza don't have access to water or to safe drinking for water. But now to focus on the other side of the Palestinian territory, while all the global attention is drawn to the catastrophic aggression in Gaza Strip and the genocide that is taking place, Israel criminal conduct in the West Bank during the last 2 weeks has not been any less horrific. Palestinians in the West Bank are kidnapped from their home. Israeli soldiers and settler militias are terrorizing entire communities. Since 7th of October, Israel has detained over 2,500 Palestinians, including journalists and community leaders. They are rounded up without charge for a reason. These detainees are subjected to cruel treatment, including beating and abuse and threat of sexual assault. They are denied access to lawyers and even or seeing any family member. Settlers also are unleashed on Palestinian communities to inflict atrocities of hate with complete impunity. Israeli occupying forces are absorbing extremist elements of settler terrorist organization with their ranks under a bridge named the Desert Frontier. Israel's extremist ministers in the Israeli government is leading a campaign to arm settlers and mobilize them to partake in the extrajudicial killing of Palestinians. So far, he has distributed over 20,000 automatic weapons to settlers during October only. Since the 7th of October, Israeli soldiers and settlers have killed more than 212 Palestinians in the West Bank, including 51 children, and injured hundreds of others during daily raids and assault across the West Bank. It's clear and beyond any doubt that the Israeli government is intent on carrying out its program of annexation, disposition, and collective punishment as envisioned by settler leaders and organizations all this year. Settler terrorism is not just enabled and empowered by the government. It is the driving force of Israeli decision-making process. Social media has also become a platform for hate and incitement of genocide against the Palestinian people, and footage is being circulated of Israeli soldiers documenting their own atrocities. Meanwhile, Israel is adopting draconian measures that enable the detention of Palestinians for their passive suffering of social media. Let us be clear here. What we demand today is more than sympathy. We demand accountability. We demand that the international community, particularly those who profess the highest democratic values, to stand by their principles and act. It is not enough to acknowledge the disproportionate violence, as they call it. It is necessary to confront the perpetrators with the full force of international law and sanctions. The protests across the globe, the voice rising in unity from every corner of the earth are not just a symbol of support. They are the embodiment of a global dissent against the double standards that have long blocked international relations. The narrative that seeks to vilify the victim and approve the aggressor is being dismantled by the sheer force of the global solidarity. Israel's recent atrocities, emboldened by the silence of certain Western leaders, have been predicated on the premise that their actions are beyond approach, that they can, without consequences, label every Palestinian as a terrorist, a sympathizer, or a human shield. This rhetoric is not just dangerous, it's a blatant attempt to dehumanize an entire population to justify their systematic elimination. The Palestinian people are not faceless mass to be dismissed or ignored. Our children are not collateral. Our medics are not combatant. Our journalists are not agitators. We are a people with names, with dreams, with a heritage that has enriched the world's tapestry in countless ways. Our narrative is one of undying aspiration for peace, for sovereignty, and for the dignity that every human being is owed, is for freedom. Therefore, I call upon all our friends and I call upon all our women here and all our allies to intensify the efforts, to keep writing, to keep speaking and protesting. This is the only weapon we have by far. It's the people's voice from all over the world to protest, to pressure the government to reassess their to pressure the government to reassess their foreign policies, to stop arms sales, to recognize Palestine, and to use their all economic, diplomatic clout to bring an end to this brutal occupation of all. Let's all now gather for the Palestinian cause, because it's not only an isolated cause, it's a cause for a just and human rights and freedom. So by standing all together, to resist all together, and so we can all demand that Palestine should be free now more than ever. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nima, for your I'm speechless. This was really powerful, and I'm not I'm from the Arab community, but I think that this goes beyond any solidarity of the Arab world or people from Africa, South Africa, North Africa, or anything like that. I think that it's a human tragedy happening. It's in force, and I really appreciate, we really thank you for having the courage to come here and speak up and say everything you said. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions to Lima, please feel free to ask her. And of course, we are now going to our next speaker. Haya, would you please go ahead?
First off, Ariel, I just want to say thank you to you and to the management team at Politics for Her for organizing this event. Politics for Her has been an ally and has showed solidarity since before October 7th. And that's something that, like, on an individual level, I'm very grateful for, because it has provided me like a support system as this has been happening. So I really appreciate that. And I'm also grateful to be a panelist amongst Lima and Rams as well. It's an honor to be amongst you both. I would say just a little bit about me. So I'm a grants officer at Politics for Her. And before I joined Politics for Her, I worked with an organization called Rebuilding Alliance, which is an international nonprofit that works to fund local humanitarian projects in the West Bank and Gaza. And it also does local legislative advocacy in the US. So that's essentially. So before I left that organization, I was working on a project to do research on the US visa waiver program. And it was during the time where there were negotiations, and there was a coalition of US organizations that met with the US State Department to voice their concerns about the fact that Israel doesn't comply with the requirements of the visa waiver program, because it discriminates against Arabs and Palestinians and Muslims upon their entry to different ports of entry into Israel. And of course, even though they met with the State Department and they voiced their concerns, and they said the State Department like showed sympathy shortly thereafter. I can't remember exactly like the period of time, but Israel was admitted into the visa waiver program. So I think that goes to show that like that particular meeting was very awaited. It was kind of an exception that doesn't usually happen. The State Department doesn't usually meet with NGOs, but it did. And although it did, unfortunately, Israel was admitted into the program. And then of course, everything else escalated as well. So I think lost my train of thought. But so yeah, I worked with Rebuilding Alliance. Over the years, I've been involved with different advocacy initiatives. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background. My family background: I was born in Jordan and raised in Jordan, and then my family moved to the United States. My father's side of the family is from Ramallah, and my mother's side is from Tulkarem. So I grew up with my father, who was a refugee, who lived in a refugee camp in Jordan. I grew up with his experiences and the experiences of my grandmother. And so that's the exposure that I had to Palestine, even though I didn't get a chance to actually visit. So that was the experience that I had growing up. And I think that's all I have for now. And I'm just excited to get into like the discussion as well.
Thank you, Haya. I think that Israel is having actually a lot of benefits inside the global community, especially with the Western countries, which is, it has no reason, but it's been this way. So I think that this space, this little discussion we have here, it's meant to expose those points of contradictory discourse on the discourse of Western governments and UN and all of the organizations that are honestly not doing much in those times of tragedy. So Rams, we welcome you to speak right now. Please, the floor is yours. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. So first of all, I want to thank everyone that's here. I think it's important that we, unite our efforts against what's going on, because that's the way forward. What's going on in Palestine is not easy, and we need collective efforts. And this is why it's important that a lot of us gather together and unite in trying to stop what's going on. I'm just gonna start with a quick background. So my name is Rams Fatale. I am in Jordan, and I have Jordanian citizenship, and I'm fully Jordanian, born and raised. But I am originally from Palestine. But I am part of the diaspora, and basically this happened because of the Nakba, when my grandparents from both sides got affected by it. Originally, from my father's side, I'm from Jerusalem, and from my mother's side, I am from Bir Zayt. Bir Zayt is like a small village near to Ramallah. So professionally, I work in grant management now. My career involved humanitarian organizations and philanthropies. That also matches my interests as a human, because I think it's important to try to collectively work on helping humans out and listening to people that are in need and finding ways to support them. Palestine is an intrinsic part of my identity. I don't believe in many stuff in life, but I do believe in Palestine, and I think this is why it means a lot to me to be talking about it, and especially with Politics for Her as a co-director of the Swana Hub. So I think what I want to talk about today is beyond calling for a ceasefire and beyond saying how inhuman what's going on. But I also want to highlight that, unfortunately, Palestinians are viewed as a let's say block for commodities that international governments and even private businesses want to get to. And I want to highlight that through delving into the gas that is off the coast of Gaza. This gas has been a big discussion for years, since its discovery in 1999. And believe it or not, I truly believe that what's going on right now is not just an ethno war. It's not just a war on Palestinians. It's a war for energy. I just want to highlight some details on that so we can look at things from an even different lens, because this allows us to be even more educated on what we're dealing with at the moment. So I'm just going to read from some papers, because I don't want to, spread misinformation or something. So I just want to be very detailed and accurate about what I'm saying. So basically, there's approximately up to 1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas off the coast of Gaza. And there's approximately 22 trillion on the coast of the Levant. So that includes Palestine, Lebanon, and Egypt even. Of course, Israel claims that this is all for them. Like not even Lebanon or Egypt have access to those. So this has been discovered in 1999 by the British company British Gas. And after the Oslo Accords in 1994, of course, the Palestinian Authority had full sovereignty over the maritime in Gaza because it was part of the Oslo Accords. Of course, this is regardless whether we agree with the terms of the Oslo Accords or not. So after its discovery, the Palestinian authorities gave an agreement to British Gas to further the discovery of this and to even put infrastructure to start extracting the gas. And that's also when Israel decided that, oops, we want Gaza back. And they started having negotiations with the Palestinian authorities, asking them to control the security of Gaza and the borders of Gaza. Of course, this is against the Oslo Accords that they supposedly signed in agreement. And this just starts the gas war on Gaza. After the agreement with British Gas by the Palestinian authorities, the Israeli government worked so hard on blocking it. And in 2007, when Hamas took over the authority of Gaza, Israel used that to basically enforce a complete blockade on Gaza in the name of security, of international security. But what they also did is that they involved a naval military blockade also on the coast, which included the area where the gas was discovered. And this also stopped whatever work the Palestinian authorities were trying to work on with British Gas. After that, in 2008, Israel declared total sovereignty over Gaza's marine area. And basically, British Gas backed out. In 2000, I'm gonna jump forward to 2022 because a lot of things happened in between. But in 2022, when the Russian war on Ukraine happened, this brought up the gas in Gaza again, because a lot of Western powers were relying on Russian gas and Russian extracted gas. So they wanted other means to deal with their energy resources. And that's why they started meeting with Israel and other governments to find ideas of how to extract that gas. And mind you, that's in 2022. That's before any of this happened. Another point that could be mentioned is that in June last year, Israel signed a memorandum with Egypt and the EU to export natural gas to the EU bloc. On top of that, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the UK at the moment, his in-laws, they signed a 1.5 billion agreement with BP, British Petroleum, the company that's in charge of a lot of gas and petroleum and oil around the world. So this all ties up to what's going on at the moment. I think this is not a war of geopolitics only, this is a war of energy geopolitics. And unfortunately, the players are not just the US and Israel. Unfortunately, the players also include countries from the Middle East and the EU and around the world. So when they're fighting this war, they're not just fighting it alone, they're fighting it with every single person that has interest in the gas in Gaza. While this war was happening, imagine that people are getting genocided. Meanwhile, the Israeli government gave out 12 licenses to 6 companies to discover additional offshore natural gas off of the coast with Gaza. So people are getting bombarded, people are getting killed, and meanwhile, there are private companies many that are British, many that are Italian, many that are European. They're going there while people are getting killed to discover more gas and discover more natural resources to extract. I really think the Israeli government doesn't even care about Palestinians as humans. They are simply living on top of the commodities they want to extract and sell. And this is even scarier because they don't even look at them as humans. They simply look at them as barriers to their product, to their service that they want to sell. So I think this is very important. I think we should really focus on this because, you know, the Iraqis in Iraq, they died for the same reason. And we could look at many other countries that died for the main reason. Of course, this was not blasted out in the beginning. This was only found out later on. So the earlier we start discovering these things and connected them, the more we can do and the more we can educate others about it. And where their taxes are going also, if they are in the US, in Canada, the EU, and so on. Yeah, so that's, I guess, what I wanted to highlight during this talk. And I hope it has been also, you know, helpful for you to further understand what's going on.
Thank you very much, Rams. Actually, personally, I have seen one or two pieces of paper talking about how Israel is already giving permission for companies to explore natural resources. And it's something like, oh, of course, that's why everybody is supporting Israel, because it doesn't really matter how many people die, colonization can't stop. Otherwise, capitalism will enter in crisis, and they need resources to explore, and it doesn't really matter how many people died for them to explore those resources. So it's really at least for me, it's a problem that seeing outside, okay, because I'm not from the Arab world, as I told you, I'm not related directly to the Palestinian people, but from Brazil, from a colonized perspective, seems like we are dealing with what we are dealing in the last 500 years, which is colonization. It's just in different forms. The propaganda is easier to spread with social media. It's easier to, I don't know, put people in sides because people wants to be on side of, I don't know, people wants to have opinions, and propaganda is very, very hard. We are seeing this. I don't know, sometimes I ask myself, oh my God, how so dramatical historical events took place, because how people thought this would be a good idea, you know, how people would support this. And right now we are witnessing people supporting this. And it's just absurd because there is a lot of children dying, you know, and people are always keen to say that they are pro-life and that children are the highest good we have in Earth. But seems like only European or, I don't know, American children are this important. The others can die, starve, be bombed, and nothing happens. But again, these are just thoughts that I have with myself. Noor says something that it's really important for us to highlight here. I believe for the true activism, Palestine should be the main attention. Climate, feminism, justice, decolonization, you name it. This is why what's happening is exposing fake, Eurocentric activism. Exactly. Like, I think that the solutions, and I'm gonna open for you girls to talk about it, but I truly believe that the solution for colonization and capitalism will be raised here in the global south, from the voices of women, oppressed women, women of color. It won't come from the Europe or any other country that is perpetrating all of these violences, because they're getting richer with this. So I'll let you girls say what you think about it.
Can talk a little bit about it. I don't know, I think it's very important that the awareness to start with, that exactly the global south now are paying attention on what's happening now or witnessing now in Gaza. It's made it more clear, crystal clear, that there is double standards, that the global south, not only Palestine, they don't matter, their lives less matter than the West, let's call it. I don't know if we should divide like West and global south, but yes, indeed, maybe Palestine is the only clear case, because it's like there's a massacre televised in front of everyone, but there's other cases, other causes is still happening of colonization, even of like a new colonization. And you can see how many children are being killed in Congo, in Darfur, in Sudan, and in Yemen. And yet still no one is speaking about it. Maybe yes, now we're all the attention on Palestine, but that's even gives another alarm that how the global south should even unite in their quest for freedom, and that their life matters, and that the very much existence, it matters. And for us, what's really important on how to unite all struggles together, on how to do even activism for Palestine and elsewhere. Yes, this year, like we have seen, 5,000 children, 6,000 children killed in only 5 weeks, in the time frame of 5 weeks. And we are in 2023. We're not even in the dark ages. We are in the modern history, and we're still witnessing it. And still people are trying to fabricate, putting even different stories on the death of these civilians, or death of these women or children. But for us, the question is, what should we do? How we should more pressure? How should we more change actually the law that it governs the whole world, the international world? What should we do? And I think that's a momentum, because we see millions. I think it's a historical moment to see millions of people already protesting in the streets and demanding justice, demanding accountability. And that's this momentum, we should use it more on how to change the perspective of the Western looking into the global South, that these people, they have their own identity, they have their own different skin color, they have their different religion, they have different culture, all kind of diversity. Yes, it's actually consistent in the global South, but for us to expose it, and I think we're already succeeding in exposing all of that double standards, especially with the case of Ukraine. That's for us the clearest, like how the West are looking at Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine, and the killing of exactly some similarity. Actually, it happens with Gaza now. It's the same similarity of cutting electricity, cutting food, killing children. It's happening now in Gaza in front of everyone, and yet the West, they look into that case as a genocide, as like a crime. They cannot accept it because maybe they look the same, maybe they have some similarities more than the global South. But Palestine came and they reminded them that no, these people matters, and these people are thriving for their freedom since 75 years, and these people are still going to remain in their land, and they're going to resist this occupation and resist all these Western norms. And that's and when I said, even in my intervention, the only thing left for us as Palestinian, apart from our resistance, is actually the international solidarity, the international protesters. Is the only thing left for us. It's the only pressure point that we have. We have nothing else left. Even our resistance is not a powerful resistance comparing to a whole machine, to a whole army that's equipped with all kind of trades. How we tell the government stop trading or arming this regime, how you stop sending weapons to this regime by killing that is used to be for killing civilians. I don't know. These are like fruitful thoughts. Like, what should we do even more? How should we, like, I've been seeing a lot of flash mobs. I've been seeing a lot of actually boycotts. And the boycott, by the way, the boycott is a very, very important tool, because it's actually the economic it's the feeding, it's the money that feeds this regimes, indirect or direct, or in a direct way. And like, even to have, now we can see that the movement of a boycott is getting more larger and getting more bigger than before. It's gonna have more influence. It's gonna have more influence of telling these regimes, like, no, if you're gonna keep killing people, innocent people, you're not gonna benefit from our own money, from our own actually contribution in the economy. And for us even to call for sanctions, it's a time for Israel to be sanctioned. It's now the time to tell them that you need to have measures. Now it's the time. This is the measures you need to take, which is sanction Israel as you sanctioned other regimes, mainly in the global south as well. Like even in the ICC, if we look into the International Criminal Court, the only actually people brought to justice were actually from Africa too. We didn't see anyone from the States or from the EU that they conducted actually crimes, whether it was in Iraq or other cases, were actually brought to justice. And even in the Israeli regime, since 75 years, no one till today we have seen anyone brought to justice from any of the Israeli governments throughout the 75 years. I'm just sending more food for thoughts to discuss.
If I may just build up on what you said, I think what's very difficult to deal with is that when you're a leader of a Western government or a Western-backed government, you're not viewed as a criminal. Like, to me, they should lock up Obama, they should lock up Bush, they should lock up Biden. But it's only non-white, non-Western-backed leaders that get, get sent to the ICC and the ICJ and all these, all these facades. They're not real. They don't do anything, because if they're truly effective, none of these US presidents would be there. I think by now the death toll is probably billions. I would not be surprised if maybe like 1 billion people among the start of the US till now have died by the US. Afghanistan, Vietnam, what they did in Africa, an entire continent. Not once were they dragged to any of these courts. Why do they still have veto power in the UN? Why? They removed Russia. Why is the US still there? It's just like, literally, it's white supremacy, and anyone that's supported by these white supremacists. And that's sad, because I understand that, like, a lot of people from the global south are always like saying things like, this is white supremacy, this is white privilege. And we don't say this because we're against white people. We're saying this because governments of those nations are being inherently racist against us. Like, it's normal to kill Africans, it's normal to kill Pakistanis, it's normal to kill Iraqis, but it's not normal, to kill anyone from the West. Like, imagine what they did to all of us just because of 9/11. It was atrocious, but that does not mean you kill an entire nation because of it. But unfortunately, their death to their governments matter more, and they don't even matter because their lives, they matter because they're a facade for them to get more money. They use these deaths to make more money. Like they're using the deaths of their own people as an excuse to go and invade other countries and to kill other countries and to topple other governments to make money off of that. So none of us matter to them. All these courts are just fake. They're not real. The UN at this point is fake. It's not real. The leader of UNICEF, the executive director, she's the wife of the guy that owns Burger King and all these chains, and he also has stocks in the companies that are producing the weapons that are being produced and sent to Israel. She's his wife. She's the wife of this guy, and she's also the executive director of UNICEF. So how is she gonna stop this war? She's making money off of it through her husband. It's all a facade at this point. I mean, it's just crazy.
Noor Kucha is asking the floor. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Just to build up on what we were talking about, what's so interesting is because, okay, just a little backstory about who I am. I'm from Tunisia, and I grew up learning as anyone else from Muslim, MENA, Arab countries, learning about the Palestinian cause, watching that on TV every day. So we have an embedded understanding that of what is happening. And then I'm doing my master's in, I did it first year in Italy, second year in Paris. I just finished in an economic analysis and policy. And that's when, because I've lived all my life in Tunisia. So, and that's when I saw the clash of all of my values and principles with the Western Eurocentric understanding of policy, of all of these frameworks and politics. So for me, it's so interesting to live all of this. It's even devastating and depressing to live this not in my country, not with people like, I'm not surrounded by people who understand this, and not people who, I don't have to explain what basic human rights are. And like, I don't have to go through these ABCs of what colonization is. And even what's even worse is that my colleagues and my friends are, some of them are from the global South. It's a very diverse cohort, but also they haven't, not much of them are Arab or at least exposed. So they're learning through the October 7th, like most of the media. So it was very hard to have these conversations that are necessary, but it's very hard to feel like you're convincing people of what is happening, because we're not in a position to call and ask for sympathy, but we find ourselves constantly asking for the Western sympathy, because that's the first step of convincing them that we're human. And then we're like, since we're human, it's like you're talking to a child. Since we're human, you cannot kill us, you know? So it's so hard to go through that, especially that in class, everyone is writing papers about decolonizing the global South, and everyone is a feminist, and everyone is talking about these important concepts. And then they're posting stories about their normal lives, which is cool. But then again, there's the whole thing that is happening that is actually touching human lives. So this double standards of you seeing you in class and all of these conferences and all of this academic understanding of decolonization, and then when this is happening, I don't see any effort from you to understand, like, these are the people that we call elites, academics, policymakers, and this is like a EU funded master's program with a scholarship, and all of these people are like the people who are going to change the world. And I believe that, and all of these people are brilliant, but then to see them struggle to understand what's happening, even with all the resources that me and my other friends are sharing, with the whole world, with the protests, and you can still see them say, it's hard, it's complicated, I don't want to take sides. After all of this, and I'm not talking about October 7th, like now, at least like how many days and 75 years later, I'm like, okay, maybe I don't trust you that much if you're going to take a position of power, if you cannot tackle these important notions. But to come back, so this is a little background of how I've been trying to deal with this from my side. But I wanted to say about what you guys were talking about is that there's this sense of desensitization to our pain, to the region's pain, to the global south, to non-white pain. So sorry for my language, but it's like it's a fucked up Middle East anyway. I'm trying to understand the other people's position, and I'm like, okay, these people grew up with seeing Afghanistan being bombed, Iraq. So it's like the region is already, it's like they're normalized, their pain is normalized, the colonization is normalized. Like since they were born, they see that and they don't question it. So it's like, it's the regions, like it's the Middle East, like, and that's how the media portrays it. So that's the first and most important problem, is that our pain is taken for granted. It's normal. So that's the work that we need to go through first before even talking about accountability. It's understanding, no, it's not normal. It has never been normal. And people are opening their eyes to that. And that's very important. So I feel like there's this, whether academic or in real life or just a basic collapse of this framework of the West knows best. And this like shattering, it's devastating, but it's important to see, like the UN has no power. The international law has no power. To understand all of this, because even though we are people from the, and especially women from the global south, we know that it needs to come from our side to tell the story, but we still believed a little bit, at least a little months ago or days ago, in this institutions. And then it burst this bubble, not just for us, but for everyone else. And that's important to see that, okay, we need to function out of this system. We need to function out of this framework to understand what's happening and to find concrete solutions that are not by their rules, because they don't know what they're doing. And I think that is empowering, at least to us, to be like, okay, now we are in, like, there's no rules. So we can make the rules of how we can fight on our own terms, of how we can resist in our own terms, because their terms are obviously failing. So I think that's an important thing. Yeah, so at least now we get to say how we can fight, and no one can tell us, because if they're gonna tell us, it failed, guys. We listened to you for years and it's not working. So at least if we're gonna fight for our own pain, we're gonna tell the rules. And I think that's a good starting point, I hope. So yeah.
Thank you, Noor. You're amazing. Thank you. You contributed a lot to the discussion. I think that everything you said, it's almost what everyone thinks about the principles and the values of the Western imperialism world. So thank you very much. And I just wanted to highlight what Frankie said in the chat, that America has created a perceptual economic decency on them. So all countries feel obliged to allow America to do whatever they choose to do. I don't think that this is like we feel this way, but every time I can tell from the Latin America perspective, every time we try to go outside, to break up a little bit this frame they created to us, we suffer a coup. We have military saying that they're gonna take over the power, and America back up on them. So I think it's beyond we feel obligated to do something. I guess that every time we try to do something, we are very quickly shut up and very quickly cut it to the scene. So I think it's a little more complicated than feel obliged to do something. You know, it's much more on the practical side of everything than the discourse that we feel compelled to follow. I think that Haya raised her hand, or Rams, I don't know, but you guys, you can go ahead, please.
I just wanted to like build off of what Nuda was talking about, and the importance of narratives and how like Palestinians, they before they even have to say that we're human, we have to like dismantle all of these media narratives that we're seeing. And that just goes to show like the power of media in dictating how people like frame an issue or how people see. And I think when it comes to the lives of Palestinians, of Gazans, there is a lot of politicization, and there is that like repeating narrative of like whenever a Palestinian comes on a mainstream media outlet, the first question that they're asked is like, do you condemn Hamas? Or the narrative is always coming back to what their perspectives are on October 7th. Like there's no contextualization, there's they're not being given a voice. And so that's what the general public gets to see. And so their opinions are shaped by that. They're shaped by what they see. They don't really see, if they don't follow local journalists on the ground, they don't get to see like the actual lived experiences of people. If they don't follow the work of NGOs, or they don't follow local news outlets in Palestine, they don't get to see what is actually happening. And they can seek out those sources. But I think there's so much politicization that it just, I don't know, it causes people to dehumanize Palestinians and to see them as, and to, I guess, favor a narrative over the actual lived experiences. So I feel like on an individual level, it's easy to kind of get lost in what mainstream media outlets are, like what their political agenda is and what types of arguments they're pushing forward. It's very easy to kind of get lost in those types of debates or thoughts. So I think on an individual level, that's why it's important to follow like local journalists that are actually like documenting what's happening. They're documenting their own experiences and their own thoughts and their own dreams. And you can find these journalists on Instagram, like everything is available. Like for example, I just wrote some down, but like there are a lot of like English speaking pages that you can follow that I'm sure many do follow. It's like by Plastia, Mu'taz Azeza, Hind Khudari, Eid Yara. And there's of course like other pages, but these are just some local like young journalists that are documenting what's happening. And so I think like on a personal level, just to keep, I guess just to keep our eyes on like what is actually happening and to not get lost in the media narratives, it's important to consistently like go back to these sources and to listen to the most marginalized voices and have them be our framework into how we see these issues.
Thank you, Haya. Could you please write down the resources you just talked about? Noor has two questions. The first for our speakers and everyone who has insights about this. The language used in this context is super important. For example, using conflict to talk about the genocide taking place is wrong. What other languages, examples we should be careful around in talking about and advocating for Palestine? That's very interesting, Nora. Politics for Her has shared in our stories on Insta just a few hours ago a dictionary on how to talk about the Palestinian situation. Even talking situation is wrong. It's like talking about the Palestinian genocide. So this is one of the resources I can give you guys. On our Insta stories, Politics for Her, we have already shared a dictionary talking about exactly this doubt of Noor. But of course, girls, if you have any other resources, please let us know. Yes, Lima, go ahead.
Yeah, basically, all the time they describe like the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and like before even what's happening now as a genocide in Gaza, like describing the Palestine as conflict with Israeli gives you the understanding, yeah, because it's a conflict between two states. No, it's an occupation, it's an annexation, it's an apartheid. So for us, the conflict, this term we never use. And the cycle of violence, for instance, we have been hearing a lot the word of cycle of violence. And no, what's happening in Palestine, even if there is a resistance, is not a cycle of violence, because you have the oppressor killing, and whether it was in West Bank or in Gaza, you have settlers killing and Palestinian defending. So there is no cycle of violence. It's the normal reaction of a Palestinian under oppression to resist the oppressor and the colonizers. These are like some of the examples. And even when we speak about even the war, as you said, like they say Israel's war. No, there's no such a thing as Israel's war. This is war against Palestine. It's not war against Gaza. It's a genocide. It's an aggression. For sure, we don't use like Israel war against Gaza, that Israel unleashed war. No, they unleashed war against the Palestinian people indeed, but it's not a war. It's aggression. It's a genocide. So these are some of the examples that we've been hearing more or less in the news. And as we always, as I think Rams said, or Haya, yeah, it didn't start from the 7th of October. It's like for us, it's already, it's a long, it's all our life. It's not only from now. And I can put actually some pages that even describes this kind of terminology that we're trying to change within the people's actually mentality, because it's important to address the root causes. It's important to address the context as it is. So I'm gonna even put it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lima. Rams, you can go.
I just wanted to highlight something. The term apartheid has been used a lot when coining or discussing Israel and their treatment of Palestinians and their existence as a whole. Like people are always talking and saying things like, "Oh, it's an apartheid state," and so on. I think sometimes we can, because the term apartheid was basically created during South African apartheid, and it originated because of what's happening there. But the term basically does not emphasize the legality or illegality of the government of the actual state. It just talks about racial discrimination within a state. So sometimes one can even go to describe it as an occupation rather than an apartheid, because the term apartheid could technically legitimize the state. So in a sense that it could be interpreted at times, if you want to be very detailed, that, okay, it's a state, but it's treating its people inhumanly. But with Israel, like even recognizing it as a legal state is even, to me is also difficult. So I always resort to occupation rather than apartheid. Of course, like any language that delegitimizes Israel is helpful, but I think like if we want to even study it further, I would say occupation, because it is 76 years of occupation. It has been an occupation before it has ever been an apartheid, and that's, I think, the main term that anyone and everyone should be using.
Lima, the floor is yours.
I want to build up even on drums, because I agree with you. It's actually very important, but there's some differences if we're going to speak about even the legal framework of the current situation. Because when we speak occupation in IHL, international humanitarian law, occupation is actually legal. If you're going to look into the law itself, the occupation, yeah, it's legal. It has some conditions. Of course, Israel all the time breaches even the law of the occupation, but basically the Palestinian organization, for instance, the civil society, they went farther than apartheid, because as you said, all these points 100% valid, because yeah, it means legitimizing the entity as a state. But yet we cannot ignore the fact that there are some policies that's actually implemented on the Palestinians in both inside Israel and in Gaza and West Bank, including East Jerusalem, that it can amount to apartheid, as everyone said. But the Palestinian civil organization, they went further. It's actually a settler colonialism, which includes apartheid, occupation, and everything, because settler colonialism is actually a crime within international law. So basically, when we even speak about occupation apartheid, it's under the framework of settler colonialism. So it's even broader to speak about as Israel, or to describe Israel as a settler colonial project, including apartheid and occupation and oppression and ethnic cleansing, etc. So just to comment on, even to use settler colonialism, basically.
Noor, please go ahead.
Thank you both for first of all answering my question, but also because there is some terminology that I was not aware of, or I have been reading, but like for example, what you just mentioned, Lema, about settler colonialism. I understood it, but I didn't know it was, for example, illegal or its repercussions other than actually being a bad thing. So thank you for that specification. I understand, and I think it's a valid point from Rams about the illegitimacy of the state of Israel to begin with. But I think I saw the effectiveness of using the term apartheid in the Western world, at least around my circles, in educating about this topic, because it's so easier for someone who doesn't know anything about the topic to be like, okay, at least let's say I'm not from the region, I don't know anything, I know Palestine exists, I know Israel exists, and it's easier for me to start understanding about, okay, Israel as a state is segregating its own population. And then it's like, oh, is it even its own population? Because there seems to be, you know, as a starting point, apartheid is, I have seen it's a very effective term, at least to describe that, okay, why are people have the right to return, or not even, they're not even from Israel or Palestine, they're just Jewish, and they can come back and have the citizenship. And people who are like generation after generation, they're Palestinian and they cannot return and have citizenship. So these questions, and people live in there, even Christians, they're not even Muslim, they're not even Jews, they are treated differently. So this is a good starting point to criticize it as a state, and then to begin to understand that it's not even a legitimate state. I think I'm not saying it's the right way, but I'm saying it's an effective way for someone who knows nothing about what is happening. So at least that's from my experience.
Yes, Rams, please.
Sorry, I don't know, my internet is lagging, but I think I heard you telling me to speak. So I just wanna first of all, can you guys hear me? Because you're all stuck.
Yes, we do.
Yes,
we can see us.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. I do agree with what you said. Because like I think for a lot of people in the West, they're scared of legitimizing Israel because they're scared it might be anti-Semitic. So when you use a term that doesn't directly target the existence of the state, but rather the way it's run, you're kind of presenting them with something that their minds can accept. And once they accept that, you have basically punctured the hole that will further expand once they educate themselves more. So I agree with what you said 100%. Like it's just a tipping point. Like using that term is safe for them. So using it as a tipping point is always great. But I think for us as activists, we also should be aware that, you know, it's more than that. So I guess this is just for us to also keep in mind.
Thank you, girls. Please, anyone who wants to ask a question or wants to speak something, add something, go ahead. You can do it on chat or unmute yourself and speak. I see that we have shared a lot of resources in the chat. This is amazing. I'll try to gather all of this and send everyone who was here with the certificate by email. Okay, because that's important. We have to keep that registered and let people know, spread the word. So, girls, do you have anything else to add? Nigma, Haya, Rams? Noor, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, because I said I have two questions, but the second I prioritize the first one. The second one, if no one else has anything to add, I'm curious, genuinely curious about. I appreciated all of the inputs from everyone and the speakers, but I was just curious about Haya and Rams's lived experience, because if I listened correctly, you both didn't live in Palestine, right? So I was just asking, in your journey in general, even before October 7th, and in your advocacy, in your activism, have you ever felt like your experience or your feelings have been dismissed or what's the word I used here? Discredited for not having lived there, either by Western people or even by Arab Muslim people, maybe even Palestinians. So I just was curious about your lived experience and if that has an impact on, like, personally or even externally, throughout your feelings and how you deal with your activism. Thank you.
I can go first. I would say, like, growing up, because like my father was a refugee and he did experience discrimination in Jordan because he was Palestinian. So I grew up like being told to hide my Palestinian identity and not really, so I didn't really learn a lot about what it meant to be Palestinian. I just sort of lived in a Palestinian family and we just sort of existed and survived. And then in college was where I started to get more involved in Palestinian advocacy. And on my college campus, it was very pro-Israeli. And so social justice for Palestine activists often got in trouble with, or they were targeted by campus police because of their activism. I would say, yes, I've dealt a lot with like having my identity be dismissed and like feeling nervous in different like classrooms or different settings, kind of like sharing that I was Palestinian because like it is very politicized identity. People don't usually like see us as humans. So it was very difficult to sort of like embrace that part of my identity and start to learn more about it. And I would say like even in like at my university, I was in the institute. My university has like an institute for women's leadership, and it's essentially like a feminist organization, and they have like a scholars program where they have like many different young feminist scholars on campus that come together, and we sort of go through this like 2-year journey together. And even in that like feminist space, it like very shortly after the program began, like it started to sort of the group started to sort of split into who was like pro-Palestinian, who was like pro-Israeli. So even like within like feminist circles, I would say it's important to like keep talking and keep sharing our experiences and keep dismantling like mainstream narratives. Yeah. And thank you for that question.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I totally understand.
I guess I can go next. Honestly, I would say maybe Haya has it harder than me because like the US is not a sheltered community for an Arab. So I guess she had to tackle that aspect much earlier. Like I grew up in Jordan, and like Jordan and Jordanians are, you know, pro-Palestine. So I never had a problem with my identity or who I am. But when I started traveling, like as an adult, I started having problems with, you know, questioning what do I identify with when people ask me where I'm from. Like, do I say I'm Palestinian? Do I say I'm Jordanian? Do I say I'm Palestinian Jordanian? And that wasn't just like out of a vacuum. It's like what I discovered, like whenever I would tell someone I'm like I live in Jordan, they'd be like, ah, like next to Israel, right? I've been there, it's cool. So, you know, that created kind of a trigger in me. Like I have to assess the person in front of me to know how to answer their question about where I'm from. And you know, that's very mundane, but also it creates like an identity crisis within you, because like I'm not ashamed of being Palestinian, but then when I'm on a queue to get a burger, do I want to fight someone, you know, just because I said I'm Palestinian? Like it creates all these like mental struggles in your head. Like, what do I say? How do I explain it? And then like they would question you, like, oh, you're in Palestine, where do you live? And I'd be like, in Amman, Jordan. And it would push them to further ask questions like, oh, if you're Palestinian, why are you in Jordan? And then you just have to explain 75 years of occupation. So I guess like in Jordan, it's a sheltered community. In the MENA region, it's a sheltered community. But being abroad makes it difficult. Like being abroad makes you want to question how much of your identity do you want to share with the person in front of you, and whether it's worth it or not.
This was amazing. Thank you, girls, for talking about your personal experiences. It's always breathtaking, at least for me. Anyone has any other questions or wants to add any thoughts? Yes. Thank you, Haya and Rams, for being so vulnerable with us. This is amazing. I think nobody else has any questions or wants to add anything. So I really want to thank the speakers. Thank you very much, Haya, Rams, Lima. You were amazing. It's always amazing to hear incredible women activists that are changing reality, because you are. It's always amazing. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Politics for Her, for giving us this platform to talk about, to discuss the subject. Thank you, all the guests. I truly appreciate your attendance. And thank you. That's it. Thank you, guys. I hope you have a very good weekend, and I hope we can overcome all of this struggles. And I know we are in the weak side of the struggle, but we are united, and that's what matters. So thank you very much, and I hope to hear from you a lot. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.